meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. I'm looking at a meaningless world. 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 A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today in studying the Course in Miracles. We're ready for Lesson 13, St. Nut's Day, the Scandinavian Christian holiday, the 20th day of Christmas, and the end of the Christmas season. It's also Lohri, with the Hindus and Sikhs Winter Harvest Festival. So and Kaleaning, is that Kaleaning or Kalaning Day in UK? Anyway. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm Forgiveness Willie, teaching forgiveness from the Ozarks. Here on Lesson 13, we're reading from the Foundation for Inner Peace version of A Course in Miracles. If you're following along in the original edition, the workbook will be fairly similar. A meaningless world engenders fear. Now look what he says about it, though. We've been talking about this meaningless world. Remember, our very first lesson was, let me make sure I get it right. Nothing I see in this place means anything. He's been talking about a lot of meaninglessness in these last 12 lessons. Remember yesterday's was, I am upset because I see a meaningless world. Well, a meaningless world engenders fear. Now he's going a little step further, and he's going to give us a whole bigger picture here. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding exercise, except that it is more specific as to the emotion aroused. Yesterday was just generally, I'm upset because I see a meaningless world. But today, he's bringing our attention. It's the opposite of love. It's fear that we're seeing. Today's idea is really another form of the preceding one, except that it is more specific in the emotion aroused. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. Now, in reality, or actually, a meaningless world is impossible. Why? Because God creates everything perfect and always maintains its purpose that it was made in. It was made in love, and its purpose is love. So everything has meaning. But he's going to explain why he's been really focusing on this idea of us seeing that things are meaningless. Actually, a meaningless world is impossible. Nothing without meaning exists. However, it does not follow that you will not think you perceive something that has no meaning. On the contrary, you will be particularly likely to think that you do perceive it. You think that you'll think that you'll see lots of things that you'll think, I wonder what the meaning of that, and we'll try to make a meaning for it. Recognition of meaninglessness arouses intense anxiety in all the separated ones. It represents a situation in which God and the ego challenge each other as to whose meaning is to be written in the empty space that meaninglessness provides. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. Okay, the ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas wherever we think that we don't know the meaning, and we try to give it some meaning. The ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, fearful that the ego rushes in frantically to establish its own ideas there, where meaningless is perceived, fearful that the void may otherwise be used to demonstrate its own impotence and unreality. And on this alone, it is correct. So it's correct that wherever the mind thinks that it sees meaninglessness, it doesn't want you just to wait and let God just show you. It wants to rush in quickly and say, see, you were vulnerable and you could be hurt. So you need to see that through the lens of vulnerability and sin and protecting yourself and avoidance and all the opposites of love. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. So we're going to learn to just see things that are meaningless and accept them without fear. So that turkey come right over here. That was one of the ones that was born to my mama turkey this year. It's another female. It is essential, therefore, that you learn to recognize the meaningless and accept it without fear. If you are fearful, it is certain that you will endow the world with attributes that it does not possess and crowd it with images that do not exist. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego. To the ego, illusions are safety devices, as they must also be to you who equate yourself with the ego. The exercises for today, which should be done about 3 or 4 times for not more than a minute or so at most each time, are to be practiced in a somewhat different way from the preceding exercises. With eyes closed, repeat today's idea to yourself. Then open your eyes and look about you slowly, saying, I'm looking at a meaningless world. So you catch that? So we're going to start by closing our eyes and saying, a meaningless world engenders fear. And after we've said that, maybe once or twice, make sure you settle into the idea. He says just once, a meaningless world engenders fear. Then open your eyes and look around you and tell yourself, I'm looking at a meaningless world. Repeat this statement to yourself as you look about. Then close your eyes and conclude. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. Okay, wow. So we're going to close our eyes at the end again and then say, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. You may find it difficult to avoid resistance in one form or another to this concluding statement, that a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. Whatever form such resistance may take, remind yourself that you are really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. And the word vengeance and enemy are both in quotes because there's really no vengeance and there's really no enemy, but that doesn't mean that you will not perceive that it is that way. You are not expected to believe the statement at this point and will probably dismiss it as preposterous. The statement that I think he's referring to, a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God. And of course also the concept here you might have a little resistance to, which that you're really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. You are not expected to believe the statement at this point and will probably dismiss it as preposterous. Note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. Overt and covert, what does that mean? Okay, overt means it's open and obvious. Like if you're prejudiced, you might be just outright, calling people negative terms and speaking to them rudely and, making it real clear that you feel like you're better than them. Okay. On the other hand, if you might not demonstrate it that so openly, which would be overt. You might be prejudiced more subtly, like you just avoid people that you think that you're prejudiced against. Or you just think, you might not give them something that you would give somebody else. Or even you might not treat them the way you would treat yourself. And so you may do it more concealed, more hidden in your mind, but still there. All right, so overt. So note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. The idea that a meaningless world engenders fear because I am in competition with God. Remind yourself that you're really afraid of such a thought because of the vengeance of the enemy. And then he says, you are not expected to believe the statement at this point and will probably dismiss it as preposterous. Note carefully, however, any signs of overt or covert fear which it may arouse. This is our first attempt at stating an explicit cause and effect relationship, or a kind which you are very inexperienced in recognizing. Do not dwell on the concluding statement, and try not even to think of it except during the practice periods. That will suffice at present. Okay, so just during the practice we'll think about this idea that a meaningless world engenders fear because I think I'm in competition with God, and the idea that you might remind yourself that you're really afraid of such a thought because of the, in quotes, vengeance of the, in quotes, enemy. Okay, so, and he says just think about that during your practice period, but don't really think about it during the day a lot. Kind of dismiss it. He didn't want you to get too caught up in an unreality that'll just get you depressed. Okay, I think that's the reason he tells us that. Because he doesn't want us to spend very much time in these first few lessons. A minute or so is all we're really supposed to spend, because he's really getting us in touch with unreality, but it's unreality that we think is reality, so he has to start where we're at. Okay, does that make some sense? Okay, a meaningless world engenders fear. I'm looking at a meaningless world. When we close in a few minutes, we can sing this. And as I'm singing it, we can close your eyes when I say a meaningless world engenders fear. Then look around as I sing a few times. I'm looking at a meaningless world, and then we'll conclude with your eyes closed. A meaningless world engenders fear because I think I am in competition with God. Okay, now let's go back and take a look. Did I say that this is for Tuesday, January the 13th of 2026? I think I did, and I did tell you who I am, didn't I? Forgiveness Willie, teaching forgiveness from the Ozarks here in my bamboo patch. I like this greenery in the background in the wintertime. Okay, we're in chapter 2, which is the separation and the atonement. Roman numeral 2, the atonement as defense. And while you're turning there, if you're reading out of the original edition too, it'll be considerably different. But if you are trying to read through the original edition, for today, read chapter 2, Roman numeral 2 also, paragraph 45 through 51. And out of your Bible, if you want to read a reading, you read Matthew chapter 13. Out of our Iyengar yoga book, read 23 and 24 and about the halfway on 24 and a half I've got here. And I said wrong the other day. I didn't say read page 20. I said 20 and 21 yesterday. I hope you read 20 also. If not, be sure to read it today. And then out of A Course of Love in chapter 1, read chapter 1, first paragraph through the 18th paragraph. Okay? All right. Is that correct? Did I tell you? You might just go ahead. I hope I told you that right. Yesterday, what did we have? No, we had that. We had in A Course of Love. Read the whole chapter 1. That's what you want to do. Hey, and I found this quote. I thought this was good. Out of I didn't write it down. You'll see a really good quote in it. I was thinking I wrote it down. Anyway, there's yesterday I told you about did I tell you yesterday about yoga is the union of the individual self with the universal self? Okay, well, let's go ahead and read through our the atonement as defense. You can do anything I ask, says Jesus. I have asked you to perform miracles and have made it clear that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. There's nothing they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt or fear. When you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. Of course, that's a quote that Jesus has written down in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 as saying that, remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. You believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you are valuing wrongly. Your understanding will then inevitably value wrongly, and by endowing all thoughts with equal power will inevitably destroy peace. That is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God which passeth understanding in Philippians chapter 4, verse 7. This peace is totally incapable of being shaken by errors of any kind. It denies the ability of anything not of God to affect you. This is the proper use of denial. So there's a proper use of denial. Anything that is not of God can't affect you. So anything that you call evil or sin or wrong or bad, it can't hurt you. You're invulnerable. Only God can have an effect on you and His love, which is always good. So use denial to deny anything other than God or love. It is not used to hide anything. The proper use of denial is not used to hide anything, but to correct error. It brings all error into the light, and since error and darkness are the same, it corrects error automatically. True denial is a powerful protective device. You can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you. This kind of denial is not a concealment, but a correction. Your right mind depends on it. Denial of error is a strong defense of truth, but denial of truth results in miscreation, the projections of the ego. In the service of the right mind, the denial of errors frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth. Paragraph 3. You can defend truth as well as error. The means are easier to understand after the value of the goal is firmly established. It is a question of what it is for. It is a question of what it is for. Everyone defends his treasure and will do so automatically. The real questions are, what do you treasure and how much do you treasure it? Very key idea. What do you treasure and how much do you treasure it? We want to learn to treasure God's Word, love. Once you have learned to consider these questions and bring them into all your actions, you will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. The means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save time if you do not protract this step unduly. The correct focus will shorten it immeasurably. 4. The atonement is the only defense that cannot be used destructively, because it is not a device you made. The atonement principle was in effect long before the atonement began. The principle was love, and the atonement was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation because belief in space and time did not exist. It was only after the separation that the atonement and the conditions necessary for its fulfillment were planned. Then a defense so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. Refusal could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of other defenses. The atonement thus becomes the only defense that is not a two-edged sword. It can only heal. Paragraph 5. The atonement was built into the space-time belief to set a limit on the need for the belief itself, and ultimately to make learning complete. The atonement is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classroom in which it occurs, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change is no longer necessary. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. You can learn to improve your perceptions and become a better and better learner. This will bring you into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. Only while there is a belief in differences is learning meaningful. Paragraph 6. Evolution is a process in which you seem to proceed from one degree to the next. You correct your previous missteps by stepping forward. This process is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because you return as you go forward. The atonement is the device by which you can free yourself from the past as you go ahead. It undoes your past errors, thus making it unnecessary for you to keep retracing your steps without advancing to your return. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle it serves, does not abolish time. As long as there is need for atonement, there is need for time. But the atonement as a completed plan has a unique relationship to time. Until the atonement is complete, its various phases will proceed in time, but the whole atonement stands at time's end. And at that point, the bridge of return has been built. Can't help make me think about all those near-death experiences. They talk about how time it doesn't really exist. They understood it when they were over in that, when they were home. Okay, and the last paragraph, 7, to finish this section. The atonement is a total commitment. Okay, you have to be completely committed to forgiveness. Weld that chain of forgiveness. And then that's the atonement, when every link's been connected and there's nothing that you're not holding any unforgiveness towards anyone. The atonement is total commitment. You may still think this is associated with loss, a mistake all the separated sons of God make in one way or another. It is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. That was something that Jesus was recorded as saying in Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. They will literally take it over because of their strength. A two-way defense is inherently weak precisely because it has two edges and can be turned against you very unexpectedly. This possibility cannot be controlled except by miracles. The miracle turns the defense of atonement to your real protection. And as you become more and more secure, you assume your natural talent of protecting others, knowing yourself as both a brother and a son. We just start getting more and more in tune with the real reality that we are, that we're one with everyone, and that we can just always practice defenselessness, forgiveness, not the two-edged sword. We don't have to defend ourselves, and that it turns out that is what moves us forward to weld that chain of interlocking forgivenesses that creates the atonement and makes us, we become so invulnerable that we can now help others. We don't have to worry so much anymore about taking care of ourselves. We know we'll be cared for. Now, I said it was Lowry for the Lowry for the Hindus and Sikhs, the winter harvest, and St. Nut's Day for the Scandinavian Christians, the 20th day of Christmas, Kalaning of the UK, Korean American Day. So our word for peace, we'll take it from the Korean people there on the Korean Peninsula. where North and South Korea are. One side of it is the Yellow Sea, and the other side is the Sea of Japan. And the word is Pyeonghwa. Pyeonghwa. Pyeonghwa be with you. Peace be with you. Korean American Day. Make your dreams come true. Peach Melba Day. Poetry at Work Day. Poetry Poetry Break Day. Printing Ink Day. Print all your poetry. Shop for, I don't know what I was writing, Travel Day? Shop for Travel Day. Sticker Day. Public Radio Broadcasting Day. Might need to donate a little bit more to that. Rubber Ducky Day. And Stephen Foster Memorial Day. He was the father, considered the father of American maybe folk music. Born in 1826, died in just at 38. And then our word for peace today is I said it's Pyeonghwa. Our word, our what I call it, our another arugula is the Sylvetta arugula. It's a Rucola selvatica, also known as wild rocket, a wild variety, smaller and slower to bolt than most cultivated sorts, with tasty and more deeply serrated leaves. 45 days to maturity. Okay, thank you Seed Savers Exchange for that. And we have enough time to close with our song and do one of our 1-minute practice periods. And of course our song will probably take a couple of minutes, but we'll take 1 minute during it, okay? A meaningless world engenders fear. Now close your eyes and say that to yourself a time or two. Meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. Now open your eyes and tell yourself, I'm looking at a meaningless world. And look around. I'm looking at a meaningless world. 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 And then close your eyes as we close with our last little phrase. A meaningless world engenders fear, because I think I'm in competition with God. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear. A meaningless world engenders fear, because I think I'm in competition with God. Okay. Well, thank you all again for joining me in studying Lesson 13 in A Course in Miracles. Hey, I've got another, I've got enough time. I just found this word. My son sent it to me. He knows I'm always looking for studying peace, and he found a word, insouciant, excuse me. And it's an adjective, and it means you're free from concern, worry, or anxiety. You're super chilled. Insouciant. So anyway, I thought I'd just share that. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that with me. The Korean word for peace is Pyeonghwa. So Pyeonghwa be with you. A meaningless world engenders fear. Pyeonghwa.